and provide some opening remarks. And Ted and the other panelists, please come on. We don't have name tags, since your pictures will be up there. No, camera shot.
Well, I have to use this opportunity to speak before Ted, because as you know, if you ever work with Ted, you can't get a word in once you get started. So I asked Mike if I could just have a few minutes. First, I want to thank Mike and NAIOP for hosting this forum and for having us. As we just heard from Senator Sweeney, hi, Mayor McCormick, Mr. Economic Development. As we just heard from Senator Sweeney, the New Jersey comeback has begun. Although that is a mantra of Governor Christie, it's so great to be at a session this morning and hear our Senate President talk about the New Jersey comeback has begun because of the bipartisan support of the legislature working with Governor Christie. Also, as the Senator mentioned, all of you should be feeling really good about New Jersey right now. I actually was part of a panel last week in Newark with the Greater Newark Business Partnership. We had a lot of developers talking about all the projects that are starting to go up in Newark and across New Jersey. And it's because of, I think, a three-pronged approach. One, we had the bipartisan support to change our tax environment. Second, we're looking at a regulatory environment. And three, we're starting to boast about it. As a result of that, the governor's talked about, we've had more than 60,000 new private sector jobs created over the past 2 years. We also are now listed by the Site Selection magazine as having new and expanded corporate facilities in New Jersey increased by a substantial margin in 2011. So we're getting the national recognition that we're really growing. We also have had leadership from Lieutenant Governor Grandano. The governor asked Lieutenant Governor Grandano to head up something called the Partnership for Action. Here on the stage today, you have the three members of the Partnership for Action. We meet every Thursday morning with Lieutenant Governor to talk about what are we doing to keep businesses in New Jersey and attract new ones. And that is led by Tracy McDaniel, who is the head of Choose New Jersey, Lauren Moore and Linda Kellner from the Business Action Center, which is part of the Lieutenant Governor's office, and Tim Lazora and myself with EDA. So we meet, so if any of you have any issues, you should let us know about it, because then we tell the Lieutenant Governor, and if there's a real problem, she tells the Governor. And that's happened. That happened when Tom Mulkeen talked to Lauren Moore and said, we have this company called Church and Dwight, you know, about Arm & Hammer. And the CEO, he brought the CEO to come meet with Lieutenant Governor, and basically he said, I'm moving the rest of my facilities to Pennsylvania. True story. And she said, you can't do that yet, and she walked him down the hall, the CEO, to see the governor, and then put together a whole panel of people, and guess what? Last week, Church and Dwight, or last month, broke ground on their new corporate headquarters facility in Ewing, New Jersey, and keeping their manufacturing plant in Lakewood. So the partnership is working. New Jersey Comeback has started. We also have Todd Anderson here from Hampshire Companies. Another great story, another really scary story. Rheology Corporation, you may know of Century 21. They were talking to Lauren and I about leaving to go to North Carolina. Great statistics about how wonderful North Carolina is. Again, brought the Lieutenant Governor in. She brought a whole team of people, and guess what? You'll hear about from Todd the new 270,000 square foot facility. Rheology is keeping their corporate headquarters here in New Jersey. You're going to hear from Mayor McCormick, who's been a champion and was helping as part of the governor's task force to create the Partnership for Action, because he understands it firsthand as a mayor of one of the largest cities in New Jersey. He helped get Vitech Systems Group, which is a leading provider of insurance, investment, and benefit administration software, to decide to move to New Jersey, create 100 new jobs in his city. And finally, in downtown Newark, we had a great groundbreaking last month with the governor and Mayor Booker for Teachers Village. Teachers Village is a mixed-use project of retail, residential, and charter schools. And we're going to hear from David Opper of CBRE to talk about how their team is part of that to attract new retail to our downtowns. So what you'll hear from all of these guys is that someone always bugs us with all of these projects. and that's Ted Zangari. Ted is the moderator of the panel, and you'll hear from him as well as the rest of the team. But I also want to recognize someone who's here who's been a part of the team and now's realized that she has a lot more fun, maybe back in the private sector, but is Laura Griffith, the former commissioner of DCA. Commissioner, it's great to have you here, and it's great because what happened with Commissioner Griffith, so all of you know, being from the private sector and doing real estate development deals as a lawyer, she came to DCA, and I know worked very closely with NAIOP and looking to how do we have our building codes make regulatory sense. So when you're renovating a building, it makes sense on how it's approached from a building code point of view. So thank you, Lori, for being here. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ted. Now I'll be quiet and let him speak from now on.
Good morning, and thank you, Karen. I will be brief because we have a wonderful panel to talk about the financial incentives, which are all the rage now that we have new incentives, newly invigorated old incentive programs. But one observation before we dwell mostly on the financial incentives that do make a difference. Those financial incentives, as Karen, I'm sure, and Tim will agree, only make the difference when all other things are equal or roughly equal. It's still about quality of life. It's still about a business's need for predictability, certainty, reliability. I think the Senate President gave you an adequate insight into what's happening in Trenton. But I think we really ought to take a moment to celebrate all that's been done. I was chastised once by a former governor when the Smart Growth Economic Development Coalition that I put together 4 or 5 years ago made its launch with a top-fold Star Ledger article in which the headline, unfortunately, didn't talk about the coalition, but the fact that Rendell, the governor at the time over in Pennsylvania, was stealing New Jersey's jobs. And the governor at the time reminded me that we live in a Google world and that these are searchable topics and that other states can and will use the information against us. And of course my refrain was, like any person would say treating an addiction, before you can solve the problem, you first have to admit that you've got a problem. And we've done just that as a state, and this is not a political comment. The current administration has gotten that message more loudly, more clearly than any other administration that I've dealt with in 21 years. And I'll tell you a quick story. The first time I met the Lieutenant Governor, I was wearing my state lobbyist badge, and she said, "Oh, you're a lobbyist, you must hate what we're doing." I said, "Well, actually, 95% or more of the time, I'm a real estate lawyer. I do lobbying work out of necessity, and believe me, I would rather be doing land use approvals, leases, contracts, and all of the other positive, productive items that go along with the deal rather than fighting government." So I'm actually, unlike a full-time lobbyist, kind of digging what you're doing. And it's helping in the sense that the quality of life message is getting out because our governor, aside from the actual steps that are being put into place, the governor's actually taking that message on the road and getting us a hell of a lot of free advertising. So let's celebrate very quickly what's been put in place. The property tax cap, time of decision has been replaced by time of application. The licensed site remediation professionals program, the single sales factor, is slowly eliminating the so-called headquarters tax, the fee moratorium put on COA, the consolidation and shared services that are going on in municipalities, the Lieutenant Governor with a cell phone number that is more than a marketing gimmick. I think she has finally given aid and comfort to those of you in the audience who, unlike myself, don't understand Trenton, are afraid of Trenton, can't figure Trenton out, don't appreciate that Trenton can be your friend. What a concept. This Lieutenant Governor has actually personalized and made user-friendly government in ways that are frankly unimaginable. The cell phone number, I'm here to tell you, is not a marketing gimmick. She will take your call. I brought a tiny little company called Goya Foods to Jersey City, and it started with a phone call. Karen's nodding her head, she remembers, on a Saturday, actually a text message to the Lieutenant Governor's cell phone at about 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. She was in to visit with the CEO at 4 p.m. on Monday afternoon. That wasn't the elapsing of even 12 or 24 business hours. She's very proactive. And finally, the red tape review panel, which has literally chopped dozens, if not hundreds of pages already from our regulations and from our statutes, and more of their work to come. It's making a difference. The Goethals Bridge is being figured out in terms of the obstructions there. CEOs, corporate site selectors, do care about all of these other matters. I would venture to say that, you know, if you ask the CEO, we can give you another $500,000 of BEEP or BRAG or Grow New Jersey or Urban Transit Hub, the programs we're about to discuss in depth. You can have $500,000 more of financial incentives, or you can get your permits and approvals in 6 weeks instead of 6 months. I can guarantee you that in almost every instance, that CEO or senior VP for site selection will take door number 2. It's that simple. Bob Franks, the late congressman, who in his later years headed up Hinge, the Healthcare Institute of New Jersey, liked to put it this way. Pharmaceutical companies and others who get patents get 20 years of protection. That's typically when a pharmaceutical company or other tech company will first look for a new factory or R&D facility. If the senior VP for site selection for X pharma company makes the mistake, or at least in the past had made the mistake of getting stuck in the muck of New Jersey, that professional could very well see 3-4 years passage of that 20-year patent protection before the building even got built and was up and running, versus North Carolina or other shovel-ready sites, land assembled, clean, fully permitted, where you could be in the ground in a matter of weeks. That's a career killer, folks. We don't have that problem any longer. But he made a very good point. When the clock is ticking, there's a need for speed. Time is money, and there's no better example of that than in the patent scenario. So we're here to talk about financial incentives mostly, which do make the difference once all of the other quality of life and business predictability aspects of a decision-making process are roughly equal with our competing states, the competition. But make no mistake, in the first instance, you better have the money to close the gap. Once the decision is made that New Jersey's in the ballpark, you know, its geography, its education system, its culture, its access to ports, roughly equal, if not better in some respects than the other states we're looking at. Now, where are they coming up in terms of the financial package? I can tell you in a recent deal, Karen's familiar, the New Jersey BEEP Brad combo was roughly about $1 million for a client who's still going through the process. The competing state offered $7 million. The only reason we were even able to keep the company warm and remaining interested in New Jersey was through assurances that Grow New Jersey and Urban Transit Hub were on the way. The company is now likely to receive an amount that is slightly more than the New York offer. It will make the difference. In the absence of a better New Jersey incentive program, we would have lost the company. There's no question that a $5 or $6 million financial gap takes away, overwhelms any of the quality of life factors that may have been better on this side of the river than on the other. So financial incentives, make no mistake, still a very, very big part of attracting and retaining companies. And with that segue, I'd like to turn to two of our panelists on the front end of the continuum of decision-making and site selection processes. And those two folks are Tom McKean and David Opper, a broker and a tenant, real estate site selector, to talk about what factors a company looks for along the way in its decision-making. If, David, you get the call, or Tom, you get the call from your superiors, go out, find us a new site, we need a new factory, we need a new regional headquarters, or the mother of all opportunities, we need a new corporate headquarters, global corporate headquarters. What are the decision-making factors, both financial and otherwise, that go into the initial process? Okay. David, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Ted, thanks for having me this morning. I guess, knowing I'm an office broker, you probably figured I had the time. So, but things are changing though for sure. So Ted, the most important thing clearly in this particular situation is where the CEO lives. That's just a joke. I just want to lighten everyone up. Nah, seriously, let's be serious about this. The most important thing, you know, when companies are evaluating site selection and where they're looking to move, is obviously they're going to take a number of criteria into effect. But in keeping in the context of the incentives, the people are the most important thing, right? So the state has to have the people and the knowledge workforce. And thank God New Jersey has that in a big way. And that's one of the big key drivers that is really working for us. Got to get those people to work, right? So transportation is going to be a critical thing, and knowing that there's a great infrastructure, mass transit, airports, right? So for companies that are based overseas, having a Newark airport or one of the international airports close by is important, right? So Mercedes-Benz is obviously headquartered in Germany, direct flight, that counts. That certainly resonates. I think where the incentives start to kick in, and the most important part is, and again, speaking from an office broker's point of view, is we have an aging stock of office buildings in the state, right? Most of the construction happened in the 1980s on the office side within the state, so that product is no longer necessarily new, and companies are seeking modern generation office. So the whole discussion this morning about the need for new development and the incentives in order to make this happen is critical. And I think we saw that quite point blank last year with the, on more of a retention side, but still as important with Realogy, and we saw it obviously with Pearson, and we saw it with Panasonic, and we saw BASF build a new headquarters. So there's a desire for new construction and modern generation stuff. So we, as a development community, have to fulfill that. And I think lastly, back to the incentives, financially, any deal right now has got to make sense. So you have to have the people and all the transportation and the criteria I said before. But look, if you can't underwrite a deal to make it make financial viability and sense, you can't go back to your shareholders and say, hey, just for qualitative reasons, I want to redo my offices, and we think New Jersey or Virginia is a better location, or Pennsylvania. We got to make it count for them financially. So I think that that's really important. And the last note on that is the most highly visible corporate headquarters relocation that has taken place that I know of on a national basis was several years ago. Boeing relocated their corporate headquarters from Seattle to Chicago. And the only reason why I'm bringing that up, it doesn't bear much relevance in New Jersey, but there was a huge, a $41 million tax incentive that the state of Illinois and Chicago reached out and made it happen for Boeing, and or else they were going to go to Dallas. So it's clearly that's the competitive field, and these deals don't come along often, so we got to grab them when they're there.
Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Zed. And just two, I think David, really hit on the major factors. And as Karen mentioned, I'm from Church and Dwight. We went through this decision just this past year, and I could probably boil it down to three main factors. You need a good workforce, you need a good infrastructure, and you need a good tax system. And Senator Sweeney mentioned the single sales factor. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's something that after the session I had to talk about it, because the single sales factor is the #1 driver to attract and retain a business. It gives a state a tremendous advantage. So don't believe the headlines about New Jersey not being a good place to do business, having a bad tax system. New Jersey now has a single sales factor system. It's a great place from a tax standpoint to do business. And the other thing I can't overemphasize too is a company wants to be someplace where it's wanted. And when we made the initial call to DDA, to Lauren Moore, who put us in touch with people like the Lieutenant Governor, Karen Franzini, Tim, Tracy, and Al, they really were sincere that New Jersey, and Governor Christie, I can't forget the governor, were sincere. New Jersey wants businesses. And because of those factors, Church and Dwight decided to stay in New Jersey, to keep 1,000 jobs in New Jersey, to build a brand new headquarters in Ewing, to keep its manufacturing facility in Lakewood, and to convert our existing headquarters in Princeton to a state-of-the-art research facility.
David mentioned a moment ago, and I'm convinced only half jokingly, that where the CEO lives matters. I'm of the belief that many times it does matter. I'm of the belief that if a CEO goes home and tells his or her spouse over the dinner table in earshot of a teenage daughter or son that the family is moving to halfway around across the country, and the daughter bursts out in tears and runs up the stairs to her bedroom because she doesn't want to miss her prom and graduation with the friends that she's made over 12 years, something tells me that may go into the decision the following morning. Don't know for sure. Something that we can't divine through the but-for test unless we put somebody on a lie detector machine, shoot them up with sodium pentothal, we might get the truth. But short of that, we never know for sure what other, forget quality of life, what human factors go in. But Tom, I'll ask you this way. How concerned is a corporate real estate professional about the loss of the quality workforce already in place that could be at risk of loss if the location change is too radical? If a company were to go from Princeton, let's say, to Doylestown, that might not be too radical, or from Jersey City to Lower Manhattan.
That's a great
But
point.
if you jump 5 states, how concerned is the company that they'll lose, particularly if it's a white-collar, a skilled labor company even, that they'll lose too much of their workforce?
That's a great point, Ted, because what we did is we actually worked with our HR people and did this mapping. Well, we did this radius of, okay, well, this is where we are right now. This is how many people live within 15 minutes, within 30 minutes, live within 60 minutes. And Church & Dwight really prides itself on having kind of being a family type company. Even though we're a publicly traded company, we have lots of people who have been with the company 20, 25, 30 years. And we didn't want to lose those people. So in our case, we definitely wanted to stay within what we'd call a commutable distance. So in our case, we were really had a choice of staying in New Jersey or going to Pennsylvania. And one thing that was surprising is that a lot of our employees actually live in Pennsylvania and commute to New Jersey. There's lots of reasons for that. But one thing I was pleased that Governor Christie and Senator Sweeney talked about is reducing the personal taxes for individuals, because New Jersey's corporate tax system has definitely gotten a lot better, but the personal tax rates right now are still a little less in Pennsylvania than New Jersey. And so I think to answer your question, that it's really New Jersey, in our case, New Jersey and Pennsylvania were the main competition.
Well, that's a good segue then, because to my next question, which was, what states are the competition? I'm getting the message really quickly that moving to New York or Pennsylvania is a strong possibility for many companies. Making a change more radical than that, no matter how great the incentive might be in Illinois or Alabama, companies are going to think much longer, much harder. It seems pretty obvious to us innately that a company would go through that kind of agony about such a longer distance move, and therefore putting us in better stead vis-a-vis Sunbelt states. But it's reassuring to hear from you that just because Sunbelt states might be lower cost doesn't necessarily follow that lower cost states coupled with a great incentive package and not so bad quality of life suddenly puts them far ahead of us in the pack. It's more a regional competition, Tom?
Certainly in our case. I mean, I can't speak for all companies, and every company may have a different point of view, but at Church & Dwight, we really view our employees as a key strength of the company. So we were committed to making a move that was good for the company, but also good for its employees.
So David, so the radius has been cast by Tom.
Yep.
You've got your marching orders. The decision's been made by the board. Company needs to find a new headquarters, R&D facility, whatever it is. The very next call, no disrespect to the public officials in the room, particularly the elected ones who think they're the first folks who come to the mind of the private sector. They don't. Maybe more so in a business-friendly administration such as the one that exists today in Trenton. But know that typically the very next call goes to many of you in the audience, the brokers, who I say all the time are the first line of economic development in New Jersey. You are the ambassadors. And frankly, one of my goals today is to make sure that everyone in this room has a great takeaway in terms of the talking points to use, so that if you're at Cornet and you have the good fortune of entering an elevator with the senior vice president for Fortune 500 real estate site selection, by the time you get to the 17th floor, that person will, and he's from halfway across the country, that person will know everything necessary to tweak his or her interest in programs such as Grow New Jersey, Urban Transit Hub, and if he hasn't already heard about our governor because he's been in a cave somewhere, the great things our administration is doing. So the message comes down from on high to CBRE, to David Opper. You need to find a new R&D facility for the company, and this is your geographic radius. What happens from there, including how do you work with your colleagues across the river, either in Pennsylvania or New York or up in Connecticut, down in Delaware? How does it all start to come together?
Yeah, I mean, probably firstly I would go to temple that day and thank the rabbi or somebody for getting that call, because they don't come very often. But you know, once I've done the
Very
thing,
downbeat this morning.
yeah, exactly. Listen, we gotta be upbeat, for sure. So you know, after the thanks on that, I would probably clearly we're gonna bring our necessary teams in and do the site evaluation based upon what I said earlier, right? I mean, we got to make sure that the right building exists, and if it doesn't, we have to figure out how that building can make it exist, and then we got to do the financial underwriting, because there's a lot of capital costs that are associated with any relocation, R&D, or it be office space, it doesn't matter. So the ability to underwrite that, as I said earlier, gets back to the state incentive, right? Because in the absence of the state incentive on that budget line, when people are looking at an upfront move cost, right, it matters so much that a deal has to be cash neutral or even positive for a corporation to move forward, and that's where the incentives are most important, and we see that with urban transit. And even the BEAT program has been very, very successful, specifically in Jersey City. I think it's important to see where the success has happened, and we can see Jersey City is a new market. Granted, the location is fabulous for New York City, but you've got modern buildings, right? So the modern buildings count, and the incentives, the BEAT incentives, have really provided the extra oomph for everyone to come across the river and to keep them. So understanding that financial component and the demographics that go into it are very important. But the last thing I do want to say for all of us to keep in mind that I'm concerned about is, yeah, with Church and Dwight, fortunately, they've maintained this presence. But what we're seeing is more of a slow attrition away. So what happens is that, and my company's no different, those back office components that used to kind of be here, well, those slowly migrate over time to other states. So it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that happens over time, where that accounting job that person left no longer is filled in New Jersey, but it's filled in a different state, and it's not as visual or sexy to discuss, but it's something that we have to be mindful of and defend against.
So thank you, David. Yep. So one of the most exciting changes in Trenton, aside from, if I had to rank order them, aside from the Red Tape Review Commission and aside from, as a package, all of the legislative changes that have been made, and even for that matter, the supersized, outsized financial incentives we now have, is the Choose New Jersey arrival on the scene. For too many years, folks like Tim Comerford and Jay Biggins and others who have joined me at global events like Cornet, watched in horror as at a show with 60,000 people, folks migrated to the booths of states and provinces of Canada with booths the size of this room, with martinis served at midnight and mint juleps if you're the Commonwealth of Kentucky at 10 o'clock at night, and two poor souls from the EDA wandering around aimlessly, not their fault, trying to network a crowd of 60,000 people. It didn't work, and imagine if we had spent money on booze as a state. Imagine the Ledger headline we would have gotten at the time. Well, it's not really, even in good times when states are flush with money, it's really never a good thing for states to be spending that money. Marketing ought to be done through the private sector, and indeed this governor took the cue of many of us in the private sector who had long urged that we turn over marketing the state to those who know best, those who can spend money on dinner cruises, buy folks steak dinners, and not have to worry about public bidding requirements or anything else. Choose New Jersey can do all that and more, and we have such a dynamic first person to run that organization that we've set the bar incredibly high. I pity her successor someday. Big, big shoes to fill. Tracy McDaniel. So we're building the story here.
Right.
You've heard Tom and David talk about some of the factors that go into the process. David in particular made a very insightful point about the slow attrition that we also have to contend with, and I guess that's probably the most valuable place where you can add value as I'm thinking about it, because you'd almost have to catch lightning in the jar to have just gone to Cornet, Atlanta, and happen to meet a site selector just as the company is considering the opening of a new factory or relocation. That's not where I guess we're expecting you to be, but rather to tell the story so that if, as and when the need ever arises, the company thinks of New Jersey, or to stanch the attrition by telling the company why they ought to be thinking twice as they proceed with this steady drumbeat, this steady march out of a state. And conversely, if we're the receiving state or potential receiving state, why that slow march ought to be happening in our direction. So you're on the scene. How do you now work with the brokerage community, with private sector site selectors? Tom's filling that role today. How do you work with the broker and the private sector person as the call is now going from board of directors to real estate site selector for the company to outside broker, eventually to a lawyer or an incentive specialist, but inevitably the call's also coming to your office.
Right.
And we'll get to Lauren in a moment, but next call's coming to your office. How do you add value? Where do you jump in? How is it all working? I know it's early, but how's it working?
Yeah, we believe we jump in even before that process, which is really exciting because we get to form the message of rebranding the state and talk about all the wonderful things that's been discussed today. So we get out in front of the process with our marketing and messaging. Currently, we have the Partnership for Action, Governor's Office, Lieutenant Governor, and we're working on that brand for New Jersey. And I called it rebranding because we will absolutely have an opportunity to tell the New Jersey stories in ways it hasn't been told before when it comes to recruiting and attracting business. And that's a good thing because that's basically been taken on by the media and social media, and you get all kind of stories out there about what they think New Jersey is. But we're going to talk about the assets. We're going to talk about the highly skilled talent and workforce. We're going to talk about the things that break through the clutter, break through the competition, if you will, when it comes to New Jersey, and that's very important. Some of the many things that our research tells us is what's been discussed at the table already. Those are some of the prime factors that we're going to integrate in messaging, whether it's a trade show. It's going to be a very, I call it an activity-based approach. We'll have trade shows tied to that, social media tied to it. We'll have our brokerage community that we're working with on the lead generation. We'll identify tools that are important for New Jersey to keep us competitive. This is aligning with the incentives. We believe we have the greatest war chest in the country. So what we need to do is get tools that help get that message out there. And one of the things that we're currently working with the real estate community, brokers, developers today, and I think is a great tool, and there are about 23 states in the country that have certified property programs. And we're looking at how we can create a marketing program that would get the sites that are available through your communities out to this real estate, out to the site selection community in a very different way. So we're saying that the board of directors of Choose New Jersey approved a $3 million marketing plan. We're going to use that channel, those marketing opportunities, to market these properties. They will also become a tool for us when we're looking for sites. The thing that we like about this program, and we're working with a kitchen cabinet of brokers and real estate representatives to help mold this. So this program will only reflect the needs of this community. We're not going to dictate it, because if it can't work for you, it's not going to work for the state. If it's not of value to you, it won't be of value to us either. So we want to make sure we get it right. We're working with consultants to customize a program to market these properties, and we're also looking at, you know, the question we often get is, how is it different than a CoStar listing, any other listing? We're going to turn this into a site selection tool that basically aggregates information that's important to that site selector. You talked about labor, workforce. We will be able to identify a site within a radius, if you will. I want a site within 30 miles of Princeton headquarters. we will be able to pull up properties available, the labor pool that's available, and all of the other key assets that are important to New Jersey, all in those reports. That's what we believe is the difference. I am really happy to say that Brandywine has been one of our first investors in the program, and we're asking people to seed it for us, a one-time investment. The Choose New Jersey board is not only supporting it by the marketing that I talked about, but also an initial investment of $60,000. So we're looking for 10 companies that can help us formulate this tool for marketing sites and helping create another channel, if you will, to get information out there. Now this is important. Another way I want to talk about it too, when we conducted our research from people outside of the state, they found that New Jersey, and I don't have to tell you, it's hard to do business with, their sites are not readily available, and that's not true. And that's not true. So we hope to basically counter that negative perception with this tool added to the other tools that we have for marketing the state.
Terrific. So that's very encouraging and not surprising. We've been hearing all sorts of, and experiencing all sorts of great successes already. And you're, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you're basically at start.
We are.
Have you done your first convention yet?
Oh yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that's been going.
Yeah, last year, not all of it, we can't. Last year we spent the year going into some of the key industry markets, you know, life sciences, the financial services, and we targeted key site selector conferences so we could basically get the message out. And for bio, which we believe is one of our strongest conferences that we feel we need to have a strong presence, and people expect New Jersey to have a strong presence, and we have large corporate companies that are represented there that are located in our state. Working with Hinge and NAIOP NJ, we were able to host a private dinner for target company leadership last year in Washington, D.C. This year, we're taking it to another step. We've basically procured 4 times the space we had last year. We will not only have a dinner, but we're also looking at how we can launch the new rebranding of New Jersey in this show. So that's really having a better message, a more unified message, working with our partners and getting out there. It was pretty dismal the first show I went to, that when I had to go and walk the halls and see some of my colleagues from other states and then see where New Jersey was. So I think we are putting the resources in the right places now. We're looking at collaboration so we can make sure we can be very strategic about the industries. We're still exploring opportunities this year. This year we will hit shows in California, Massachusetts, we'll be in New York, Pennsylvania, Charlotte, and also in Connecticut. So we're looking at shows in those areas. We're looking at ways that we could, what we call pile on. So not only is there a trade show, but we'll have one-off meetings with either site consultants or companies that are in our pipeline for leads. And can I talk about leads for a second? One of the things that we've done working with the Partnership for Action is generate a very predictability lead generation model. So it's research-based. So we take each cluster and we're able to identify target companies that have the propensity, if you will, to either locate or expand in New Jersey. In those leads, we go out one-on-one phone calls. We have several touch points that we have, and we talk to those companies. We find out what their business strategies are, what their growth plans are, and then we start talking about the assets of New Jersey. It's a relationship model. So when they are considering either expansion or a relocation, they have a person, they know who they can call, and it works quite well. We had an active project. This was one of the, and Karen knows what I'm talking about, one of those fast projects. We had 4 weeks to generate leads out of a market, out of a country, if you will. And we were able to identify over 160 leads that could be interested in New Jersey. Out of those, we were able to add 4 active projects to our pipeline. Those are the types of things we're doing, but it takes time, it's about relationships, and those companies that we touch, those 160, they know about New Jersey. So they now know they have a point of contact. If they never considered, they had to call. And throughout the year, there will be several touches to those companies through our marketing efforts.
I'd like to stay on the topic of leads. It's my next question, but in a different sense. Business cards. There are two people up here. If there were bubbles coming out of their heads right now, it would be, how the hell do I get my hands on some of those leads? A mayor who's thirsty for more revenue and ratables in his community, probably struggling like the other 565 mayors with a deficit, a gap, and a way to raise funds without raising taxes, and a landlord who would love to fill up some of his buildings and build some more buildings. What's the interplay? How does the mayor of a municipality get on the radar of those companies, get his hands on some of those leads, and the same for Todd and the other landlords in the audience?
Right. The way the Partnership for Action works, we're the marketing and lead generation component of the workflow model, if you will. So if you look at leads as a funnel, our goal for 2012 is to generate 2,000 leads that we could pass through this pipeline. That means we're qualifying companies. It's more than a business card. We qualify, we sit down and we talk with each one of those leads to understand exactly what their strategic growth patterns are, or where they're considering. And then we get it down to the ones who might be considering an East Coast attraction or East Coast expansion. And if it's not geographic, it's tied to an industry. So if this company is tied to one of our anchor industries that we're targeting, we make sure that they understand all of the assets that we have in that industry. Once we qualify a lead, we understand exactly what they're looking for: capital investment, jobs, what industry it's in, what type of jobs or labor force. We then pass that on to the Business Action Center. And then at that point, they're able to work with the brokerage communities to identify, create scenarios, one, for not only the incentives, but scenarios that include properties. So that's a segue for Laura.
Okay.
Hint.
Tom, you've, well, before we get to Lori, you've heard about this new paradigm. How does it work in the real world for you, Todd, as a landlord? Do you like what you're hearing? What's your initial reaction? I think many of us in the audience, myself included, are getting their first insights into this new structure today.
Yes.
How can it be made better, and what questions might you have for Tracy?
I'd like to say I'm on a bit of a roll here, because prior to relocating to New Jersey, I worked for a company that happened to be a landlord of a building called 100 North Riverside in Chicago, which was the recipient of a company called Boeing. So kudos there on that one. So, fast forward to New Jersey. Everything that everybody's talking about is all good. I mean, I think from the top down, and I think in every organization, I don't care if you're a small company, if you're manufacturing, if you're a merchandiser, I mean, the whole message always resonates from the top down. I can't